Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, ensuring a better life for Georgians in the 21st century. More than 100 programs of study prepare students for successful careers in the critical professions of education and nursing, as well as business and the liberal arts. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
Coming up on Lawmakers, Democrats introduce a plan to pay for the state's transportation system and preserve the homeowner's tax exemption. Anticipating a long process to change parts of the state's Juvenile Justice Code, and legislation that would revise the Public Defender Standards Council. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Also on tonight's broadcast, representatives from Sustainable Business make an appearance at a meeting of the Joint House-Senate Economic Development Committee. GPB Radio's Dave Bender has details on a plan to close 2 Georgia Visitors Information Centers.
And more talk on a $1 cigarette tax from the House. But first, our top story tonight, Senator Steve Thompson introduces his transportation plan. Well, so far this session, we've heard of a regional transportation tax plan from Senate leaders and a statewide tax plan from the House. But today, Democratic Senator Steve Thompson introduced his version of a statewide transportation plan, which also includes a protection for property tax relief, an annual grant to Georgia homeowners which may be in jeopardy because of budget shortfalls.
What it would do was give the people of this state the opportunity to vote on a statewide sales tax for the purposes of transportation. It doesn't limit it to roads and bridges, which has been a constitutional issue in the past. It doesn't limit it to the motor fuel tax. But the funding would create $2 billion a year, which is really the money that it'll take to solve our problem, provide connectivity and alternative modes of transportation in this state. And it's way past time, 25 to 35 years past time. It was time before we ripped up our trolley tracks, which wasn't the most intelligent idea we had. But in that constitutional resolution, with the verbiage that we've chosen to make it tax reform, we include, to put in constitutional format, the homestead tax exemption for now and in perpetuity for the citizens of Georgia, so that tax exemption will be saved and that nobody can take it away from them. That gives you a gain of $1.6 billion a year for transportation and $400 million a year back to the taxpayer. It's a good proposition. I stand open to hear other ideas, and trust me, I have been in the majority and I have been in the minority. And because I'm in the minority now, I don't look for this thing to go sailing through here. I offer anybody the opportunity. Co-op it, hijack it, take it. I'll sign it with you or I'll stay off of it, it'll help you. But take advantage of the idea of saving this homestead exemption for people that pay the freight so that young people can afford to buy houses and that old people can afford to stay in them. Do not take this tax exemption away from them.
What kind of projects do you envision statewide when it comes to the $2 billion that this could generate?
Well, you see, ICE-T and T21, both of them on the federal level, have incentives for alternative modes of transportation. In our Constitution, the motor fuel tax, you cannot spend it on anything other than roads and bridges. This particular money lists broad transportation uses. That means it'll be freed up to address transit, light rail, bike lanes, but most particularly infrastructure, highways, roads and bridges also.
And this again would be a 1 penny sales
1
tax.
penny paid for 1/3 by people from out of state, but $400 million will go in the public's pocket the people that are stakeholders that actually buy property and have a homestead exemption. It'll protect it and keep anybody from taking it away from them from now on.
And can you explain again how the out-of-state people end up paying for this?
Right. Well, it's a transient. People spend sales tax here even though they don't live here. So if you look at it, it's always been projected at about 1/3.
Again, this would be a constitutional amendment, so like the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker's transportation plans, the people would vote on whether or not to impose this 1-cent sales tax increase.
A coalition of child advocacy groups today presented proposed changes to Georgia's Juvenile Justice Code to the House Children and Youth Committee. Although Just Georgia intends to ask the legislature to revise the law in the next few weeks, actual changes to juvenile court proceedings are probably years away.
No, is it's been 4 decades since the original juvenile code was passed in 1971, and it's never undergone a full review.
Since 2004, a team of lawyers, judges, and social services providers has worked to modernize the code. Proposed changes to the law would keep young offenders in the juvenile system, in contrast to current law that often sends adolescents to superior court.
As we know, that's a little bit inconsistent with how we treat 18-year-olds in other areas of the law. For example, 18 is the age of majority, that's when you can vote, that's when you can join the military without a parent's consent, that's when you have the right to contract, etc., etc. And so the proposed model code would suggest that we should bring Georgia into line with the age of majority as far as juvenile court jurisdiction goes. This issue has generated a lot of discussion. I won't say that it's controversial. Philosophically, all of the stakeholders that we've heard from seem to agree that this makes sense. It makes sense that when you turn 18 that you're an adult. The issue around this is primarily a budget issue.
Other proposed modifications include a ban on detaining children in adult correctional facilities, a process for restoring parental rights, and court-ordered cooperative services for children who commit nonviolent crimes or are chronically truant.
It would be a really big change for Georgia, and it would create actually a lot more work for our friends at the Department of Family and Children's Services, because they're the agency that the reporters contemplated would manage this process.
The legislation is slated to be introduced in the Senate, where its movement is expected to be faster than it would be in the House. But its proponents admit that they still have details to iron out.
Where we don't have pretty strong consensus around one of these substantive changes, we have no intentions of just putting that in the bill for the purposes of killing the bill.
And if it does clear the General Assembly, training will be required for judges, attorneys, and caseworkers.
So there's going to have to be a kind of an implementation phased-in process over a period of months, potentially 6 to 18 months is what we've been talking about, but we still haven't finalized any of that. So what I'm telling you with all that is, I think that the budget implication then means that we potentially won't even be looking at what the budget would have the impact on the budget until probably 2011 or 2012.
Just Georgia expects to introduce legislation revising the Juvenile Justice Code in the Senate in mid-February.
A bill that would overhaul the state's indigent defense program is making its way through the General Assembly. The measure is likely to pit advocates for poor defendants against some state lawmakers who say the program is simply not working. Joining us live is Valerie Edwards. Valerie, what's the latest?
David, as you know, the Public Defender Standards Council has come under intense scrutiny, in part because some say the group has allowed costs in the case of convicted Fulton County courthouse shooter Brian Nichols to spiral out of control. Now, a measure introduced by Republican State Senator Preston Smith of Rome would restructure the council, making its 15-member body an advisory arm to the group's director.
Over the last couple of years, the council has really engaged in a very adversarial relationship with the legislative and executive branches. They've declined to provide us with budget information in order that we provide them with enough money in the appropriations process to run the system. They've declined to work with us on explaining what the various cases cost and how much needs to be appropriated. They've restricted the director and issued statements that he does not speak for the council. They've issued a statement at the last Oversight Committee meeting that neither the director nor the director over the conflict case division is to be allowed to speak on their behalf.
Opponents of the measure say Senate Bill 42 is simply intended to weaken the Public Defender Standards Council and keep the group beholden to the governor. Wyke Orr is a member of the council. The former Democratic state representative describes the measure as political meddling.
First, it transferred us from the judicial branch, where we belong, to the executive branch so we could be more easily controlled, and I might say improperly controlled. Secondly, it took our director out from under our employ and put him working for the governor at the pleasure of the governor. So this council does not even control its own director, which is supposed to carry out its mandates. And finally, it blurred the lines of authority between the council and the director. It gave the director powers that are exercised by the council, so it was not clear what powers the council has and what powers the director has.
You should know that the Public Defender Standards Council is currently controlled by the governor's office. However, recently the group asked Georgia's Attorney General for permission to file a lawsuit that would allow it to be managed by the state's judicial branch. That request was denied. Senate Bill 42 is likely to be one of the most contentious issues we'll see during the '09 General Assembly, as advocates for poor defendants square off against lawmakers faced with a budget deficit in excess of $2 billion. Reporting live, I'm Valerie Edwards for Lawmakers.
Thanks for that report, Valerie. In other news, Representative Ron Stevens was back in the well this morning, urging support for his proposed $1 increase on the cigarette tax. Beyond raising much-needed revenue for the state, he says the measure has now become personal.
You know, sometimes you just get real proud and you want to just get up and tell all your friends things that have happened. But my daughter told me, Karen, last week that I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time. So I'm real proud of that. And that's partly the reason that I'm bringing this bill back to you, because last night had an uncle that I worked with every summer in the tobacco fields, picking tobacco, carrying it to the market, chewing it, smoking it, dipping it, whatever we could, because it was cheap. I'm hoping that you'll, and of course last night he passed away after some lung surgery. Now, Rhonda, Sandra, and Junior won't get the opportunity for his grandkids like my dad. This has gotten personal, folks. I'm going to introduce today House Bill 39, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you.
Pre-filed on January 6th, House Bill 39 has yet to be assigned to committee.
The House and Senate held a joint Economic Development Committee meeting today to discuss plans for creating more jobs in Georgia through sustainable business ventures. Lawmakers Minu Hosseini joins us live with more. Minu.
David, at today's meeting, legislators listened to proposals from sustainable business companies who propose plans to create jobs and make Georgia more eco-friendly.
So what is sustainability? Well, there are a lot of different definitions for it. The way I talk about it is innovation and new technologies. Those are the type of businesses that we want to be drawing to Georgia and bringing in for economic development. The more traditional way of talking about sustainability, however, the social impacts. Well, social impacts are quality jobs and employment and the number of jobs that we have. That's how the social impact. Environment, that's our natural resources. But it's the resources that our businesses use, and we want to use them efficiently and effectively, and when businesses incorporate that, they're saving money, which is really important in these hard economic development times. And then economy. We all want a dynamic economy for now and the future.
The business representatives at today's meeting presented their company's goals towards going green and making more jobs, a project that they said would help Georgia's economy and job market.
Recently, in November of 2008, we hit the recession wall, just like the rest of the world. But I will tell you that although we're not recession-proof, we will rebound. We have a strong foundation and core here. It may not happen quickly. I can tell you that the recycling industry will be there and one of the first to assist you in that. Why recycle? Recycling does mean business in Georgia. It creates jobs, saves energy, conserves natural resources, contributes to water conservation, helps save landfill space, and helps reduce pollution.
On February 12th, representatives from sustainable business companies will meet at the Capitol to appeal to legislators for their help in production of alternative energy in Georgia. Reporting live, I'm Minu Hosseini for Lawmakers.
Okay, thanks for that report, Minu. Well, we invite you to check out GPB's online resources at gpb.org/lawmakers. Find the latest from GPB's radio news team and watch Lawmakers online. All that and more at gpb.org/lawmakers. We invite you to visit that site and vote in our legislative issue poll. We'll bring you the results of that poll later this week.
We'd also like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website's a great research tool that we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
This week, our colleagues in GPB Radio are beginning a series entitled The Money Crunch. These reports will be looking at how the state's declining revenues and impending budget cuts will affect different areas of the state's services. Tonight, we get a preview of Columbus Bureau Chief Dave Bender's report about possible cuts in economic development that could close 2 Georgia Visitor Information Centers. I began by asking him which ones are being looked at and why.
The state budget has a $2 billion shortfall in the 010 budget, and they're looking to save money wherever they can, clearly. There are 11 centers statewide, and the Sylvania and Plains Center are lagging in the pack at relatively 67,000 and 56,000 visitors in 08. So they appear to be 2 that may well be closed.
And these 2 are a little off the beaten path. I don't know about the other 9, but these 2 are off the beaten path. Does that contribute to why the numbers are a little bit lower?
That's true. The Plains Center is on a state road between Plains and Americus, and it's about 40 miles off I-75, I-85 that goes north and south. Now, on one hand, that's off the beaten path, but according to State Senator George Hooks of Americus, that's the reason people want to go there. It's not a pass-by destination. It's not on the main highway. People want to visit that area. They want to visit Americus, Plains, Andersonville, and of course former President Jimmy Carter and his compound and the vicinity of Plains in the area. So he says that's a good reason for people to go there.
And Dave, you mentioned Jimmy Carter and you mentioned George Hooks, and there is a law in last week's budget briefings that George Hooks found that may cause some complications when it comes to closing primarily that Plains Visitor Information Center.
That's correct. Hooks dug up a Georgia law from 1977 that says, and I quote, "The state shall maintain a visitor center in the town of any Georgian who becomes president." Bingo, there we have Plains. So I believe he and his colleagues are going to fight hard and long to keep that center open.
Now, it'll be interesting to follow up with that. Now, when we look at what these mean to that area, there are some people where these that live in that general area where these visitor information centers are quite special to them.
That's right. Penny Smith is the manager of the center, and I was speaking with her. She almost became emotional. It was just it's her life. She's married to a Plains native, and she says people come. She shows them around. She knows the area. She knows the lay of the land much more than, let's say, a bus tour that was passing through. And she can show the people the real things, in her words, that would keep them and have them spend money in Plains and Americus and the area and in hotel reservations and the like.
People think of these visitor information centers and welcome centers as places you can just go to get brochures, a little information about that, but places like Plains, they do a little bit more.
That's right. Smith said that many of the people who are coming through trying to find hotels and other lodging in the vicinity so they can make day trips or overnight trips in the area. Andersonville is about 20 miles in the vicinity, and as of course Americus and Plains and other sites as well in the general vicinity. So she tries to help them out with hotel reservations and the like, and also just to find the right way, how to get to these places. A lot of these sites in the vicinity are down small country roads. People may not know them if they're not from that area or even from Georgia.
Dave, what kind of money can be saved by closing these visitor information centers?
Well, they're looking to save about $186,000, and that's part of the Economic Development Office's budget.
Okay, Dave Bender, Columbus Bureau Chief for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you so much for joining me today. Good information.
Thank you, Dave.
You may want to slow down as you're going between those visitor centers. That's because speeding drivers could produce over $23 million in new revenue for Georgia under legislation introduced today. Governor Sonny Perdue's House Floor Leader, Representative Jim Cole, introduced House Bill 160 today. That's the super speeder legislation designed to fund the state's trauma care network by discouraging trauma-causing behavior. Now, if this bill becomes law, an additional $200 fine would be added to those who drive
drive over 85 miles per hour, excuse me, anywhere in the state, or over 75 miles per hour on a 2-lane road.
Senator Nan Orrock took the well this morning to discuss Georgia's ailing peach care program. Her argument was twofold. First, she stated that the governor's proposed hospital tax would further cripple health services and that health funding solutions lie in a federal partnership bill currently being discussed in Congress.
Our solutions don't lie in these short-term solutions, these shortcuts that short-circuit our healthcare system. During the time I've served up here, I've watched us squeeze and squeeze and squeeze our hospitals, our healthcare providers in terms of the reimbursement rates. Somehow that pocket is always the one we think we need to go to pull some more money out. Our healthcare providers are providing services to people now way under what it costs them to provide those services. We're asking them to take less than 85 cents on the dollar in many cases, and that applies to hospitals as well as individual providers. So let's don't short-circuit our healthcare system. A sick tax on our local hospitals would take us definitely in the wrong direction. And any of you with hospitals in your communities that provide jobs and services, I think, would agree with me. So where are we going to find the resources to address the needs in healthcare? As we're grappling with this bad economy here in our state and with the shrinking state revenues, the $2 billion in growing hole that we've got to plug, we've got some good news. And the good news is that a partnership with Washington is possible. It's within our reach, a partnership with federal government. With help from Washington, our Peach Care for Kids health insurance program can be expanded to cover more of Georgia's uninsured children. Our U.S. senators from Georgia are facing a vote in Washington in these next days, this week. And that's going to be a vote on whether we're going to protect and expand our children's health insurance program. We call it Peach Care for Kids here in Georgia. It's a program that's in every state. A vote for this program in Washington, a vote to expand, protect the S-CHIP bill is a vote that's going to help Georgia families. It's a vote that's going to help Georgia doctors, nurses, therapists, going to help the dentists, and it's definitely going to help our Georgia hospitals. It's going to help Georgia's economy. We need to fully fund health care insurance for children. We need Washington sending us dollars to provide health care for Georgia's children of working families.
Healthcare issues continue to be of great concern during these difficult economic times. Approximately 800 nurses marched to the Capitol today to make their voices heard. Lawmakers' Tiana Fernandez has that story.
Georgia Nurses Association started their annual legislative day early this morning at the Georgia State Student Center. They discussed the impact of the budget crisis on healthcare issues during this legislative session. Before introducing Secretary of State Karen Handel, GNA President Cindy Balkstraw spoke to us about budget cuts to the nursing programs.
The proposal that the governor has put forward is to eliminate $30 million, which came from the original tobacco settlement monies, which we worked really hard to try and get moved past all of the powers that be to make sure that that money was set aside.
And as soon as the meeting adjourned, the nurses marched over here to the Capitol to show legislators how important the healthcare issues are here in Georgia.
I am really passionate about the funding, of course, and trauma, especially for me.
Budget cuts to school nurses is one of the biggest concerns.
I currently am in community health and I'm working as a school nurse, and that would be detrimental to our students in public schools.
It's really important that that school nurse is kept in place because they're often the child's only way of getting any kind of professional health services.
Georgia Nurses Association plans to stay in close contact with legislators until health care is a priority for the state budget. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Tiana Fernandez.
Plans for 2 new coal-fired power plants have some weighing the economic benefits with the environmental impact. Brittany Evans spoke with both sides and has the details.
Why are these powerful forces and chambers, the Georgia Chamber, supporting these plants when we know there are options, and they're cost-effective options?
This is the kind of question the group Georgians for Smart Energy is asking in talks over 2 proposed coal-fired power plants in Georgia. The plants would be located in Washington and Early counties. Power for Georgians, the group of 10 EMCs proposing Plant Washington, says the plants are economically viable.
When you look at all the options of providing electrical energy,
coal is the most economical at this time. It's the most abundant source of domestic energy we have. And we recognize that we can create electricity, as we have more than 50% of the electricity in the United States this way, and so we know it's the most economical way to do it.
The opposition says energy efficiency is the way to go.
The cheapest energy that we have is the energy that we don't spend.
Another issue on the table is the plant's environmental impact.
The pollution from those plants is going to be added to the already poisoned air that is out there in Atlanta, Georgia right now.
And today's technology is so advanced compared to what was used when power plants were first built in the 60s and early 70s as relates to coal. And so today, when you compare today's technology to what was used back then, it's like comparing a 2008 automobile to a 1960 automobiles on emissions.
Both plans for the coal power plants are still in the draft stage. The Environmental Protection Division will review those plans before granting the permits. Public hearings will be held in the next several months. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Brittany Evans.
Now, Brittany also spoke with the vice president of LS Power about the Longleaf plant. He said the company will use modern pollution control technology to reduce impacts. He also said the plant will be a cost-effective and stable source of electricity. Well, Tourism Day at the Capitol always showcases the great places to visit in Georgia, and today was no different. Senator Chip Pearson chairs the Economic Development Committee and proved again that this year that wearing the right hat can get you on TV.
Now my honor to call upon the distinguished senator from the 51st District to speak to the very important resolution. And I hope he's not wearing a foolish-looking hat.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is indeed an honor to be here representing tourism on Tourism Day. And you know, a lot of folks can go to Augusta and wear a green jacket. Not many people can come to the Senate chamber and wear a red hat. But only on this day, Mr. President, I will wear the hat in recognition of Tourism Day. I want to thank all those that are down here today. You have many folks from your district. We hope that you will go out and be with them for the different events and supporting of the 240,000 jobs, $34 billion annual revenues, and $1.5 billion state and local taxes that come through our second largest industry. Mr. President, I appreciate the opportunity.
Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the Transportation Special Local Options Sales Tax, or TSPLOST, is scheduled to be discussed in committee, and we'll have the next Money Crunch interview with GPB Radio Augusta Bureau Chief Mary Ellen Chatham. We'll have those stories and more tomorrow on Lawmakers at 7. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. on GPB or 7 a.m. on GPB Knowledge. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Georgia Gazette. Coming up on GPB Television, Georgia Outdoors, tonight's episode is This Land is Your Land. That's next here on GPB. And that's our broadcast for the 7th legislative day of the 2009 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Nwandi Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. for Lawmakers. Good night.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.